Welcome back to part two.
Hello, handsome. Thank you. Fresh cup of coffee.
That's it. It's good coffee, ready to go again. I got some water.
I went upstairs. It's not upstairs. It's next door.
Oh, is that it?
And they're laying down the same floor I have. So that means it's it. And it's not professionals. So it's going to take a long time.
Wait, and if you're lucky, they won't have to do it twice.
Anyway, I'm glad. They seem like nice people. I had a really great neighbor over there. Absolutely loved her, but she's moved on, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
This one move and that one die.
Life is
I'm being abandoned by my little old lady caretakers. So if I can pick up on where we left off without forgetting where I left off.
right.
I wanted to complete something we started in the last initial bit, and I went on so many sidetracks because I probably haven't had enough sleep, so I lost track of what I was doing. So,
Make you the host again. So it's like we were on the
yeah, but I got to close it because I don't want to forget.
yeah.
So you talked about identities.
Yeah.
And so my point was, I think if I didn't close it, this is all I'm trying to get to, is that everybody's revolted against the empiricism because empiricism maximizes responsibility and actively suppresses everything from interpersonal crimes to political crimes, all the way up to these lovely stories we like to tell. Right? So what's happening, of course, is by the continuous recursive disambiguation of falsehood into truth, we discover the laws, including the natural law, and in doing so, leave only reciprocal, proportional cooperation available to us. And this develops a standard of measure by which we can measure all deviation from that standard. And then we can look at that standard and say, is this an internal preference that meets a good, but does or does not? And then whether that internal preference creates an internal harm or not, well, that's just going to be true or false. And whether it causes external harms, which is just going to be a true or false. And then whether the group is saying, I'm okay with externalizing these costs onto you, and whether you're saying, yeah, I'm not so okay with that. And therefore, whether we have to force those costs of adaptation back onto those people committing that externalization in order to domesticate them back toward the natural law. So it's not there's no relativism in this argument.
But what strikes me in listening to that fine exposition, in summary, is that the issue is that the criminals have surplus resources which they use to bring to bear for the purpose of furthering their criminality.
Correct.
Which is not surprising.
No.
And it is at the general expense of everybody.
Well, it's like China and Russia are demonstrating right now, and Islam is demonstrating right now. Their cost of internal organization. Just think of it as what the left is doing, or what women do. Their internal cost of moral organization, right, providing moral incentives to cooperate, is higher than their justification of power by external expansion. It's basic physics, right, which we fully account. And what they're saying is, I need power to maintain the current state of internal irresponsibility. The only way to defend internal irresponsibility is by externalizing my power, so, right, to defend, to increase the scope of external irresponsibility. This is exactly what's bothering Putin. It doesn't bother him so much that NATO is 600 miles from his doorstep, especially if we don't put missiles there. What bothers him is that they've created a national narrative that the Ukrainians, despite speaking a different language and being genetically very different from them, are Russians, and that therefore they have a right to some sort of unification or dominance over despite the Ukrainian with a different language and different culture that's more advanced than the Russian, wanting their self-determination. The problem is if democracy works in Ukraine, it will, that means it can work in Belarus and Russia. And so they can't tolerate the expansion of democracy. Meanwhile, internally, we see Putin quite correctly as warring against Bolshevism V2 because he knows what Bolshevism V1 did to Russia. And so what he is really trying to do is prevent two things. He's preventing one thing he shouldn't, the expansion of self-determination by a non-Russian people, right, into joining the European Federation, where we mutually ensure one another's sovereignty. And his justified attempt to suppress the expansion of wokeness, which is just Bolshevism V2. So he sees, whereas he sees Bolshevism as destructive, he doesn't see it as immoral. Whereas he sees Bolshevism V2 as immoral. So it's this complex combination of axes that are the issue. In this case of China, I think consensus is rapidly developing that Xi has probably an alcoholic, probably have ego issues, and may have mental issues. And so that the problem is he's killed so many of his, or made disappear so many of the opposition that he may not be able to do it. And he's willing to burn, like Russia, Putin is willing to deprive most of Russia's territorial cities and towns, villages, of any chance at improving their station in order to maintain the illusion in Moscow of wealth, or at least east of the Urals, west of the Urals rather, and to restore the military, because the military is really the only thing Russia has going for it, is a declining population and a decaying military infrastructure left over from the Soviets. And so he's trying to restore that power because he thinks that can happen. So that makes sense. But Xi doesn't make any sense at all, because China was going fucking gangbusters and we were happy. You know, nobody gives a shit about, nobody cares about a China that's richer than America that has the behavior of Switzerland.
Right.
It's if you don't have the behavior of Switzerland, everybody gives a shit. Just like nobody cares about the size of Russia, its population, if it has the behavior of Switzerland. Everybody objects if you don't. The question is, why don't you have the behavior of Switzerland? And the answer, of course, is internal dysfunction. Is so you can't. It's like, you know, I always get the temptation as a CEO to go out and buy companies. It's because I feel like I have lost agency over my company, because, you know, everything, if I've done it right, everybody else is contributing value, and there's actually no point in me except as a judge once in a while. And so I want to create value. So I tend to acquire customers, employees, or companies, right? And that tends to be my job. If my job is internally focused, it means I failed in my job, right? Well, I mean, to some degree, Xi facing the same issue, is that, you know, he wants his ego and his legacy to be equal to Mao's. Right. Like, he wants to be thought of as one of the great Chinese emperors. He's not trying to actually continue the conversion of so many people out of poverty, right? And he doesn't care if he makes them suffer, just like Putin doesn't care if he makes Russians suffer. Whereas the problem in America, or in the West, especially in Europe, you can't even make people work hard versus less suffer. So, I mean, anyway, that's what I was trying to get to, is that every civilization rebelled against what we're doing, right? We created a system. And so it's not strange that at present, we're still going through the tail end of the Jewish counter-rebellion, which we consider Marxism, neo-Marxism, postmodernism, whatever, Bolshevism, new Bolshevism. Just like we went through the Kantian revolution, the German philosophers and their revolution that led up to their unification and military expansion. Just like we went through the French development of every bad fucking idea in history, in European history. and the French conquest of the world. So we're as we slowly domesticate these other sub-civilizations, right? They all rebel against us. The thing is that we had a cognitive, genetic, and institutional and technological advantage enough to bear over it, right? And we have a geographic advantage because England, Canada, North America, and Australia, New Zealand are fucking islands, right? So that we have a huge discount on self-regulation, control, protection. So, and we have a huge discount because our transportation is now the fucking oceans, which is the cheapest way to send anything. And so the internal continents don't have this, but they rebelled. So Islam is rebelling. How did they came out with this fundamentalism only in 1920? But what happened is they saw how the communists were working and they adapted the communist policy. So China only copied us until Z came on board, and then he went back to and then the Russians got to Putin, gets enough restoration, he goes back. So I'm like, why? It's another example of Europeans can't colonize. We can't really even domesticate. The Chinese learned the only thing you can do is isolate. You could trade with other people, but you can't, we have to protect our seas because our Anglo civilization is a sea order. So we have a different mandate than China or Russia or Europe, right? Which are continental civilizations. So our mandate is we've got to maintain somewhat of our control of air and sea because we're a naval and air power rather than a land power. And so you can understand all these things, but the answer, we've just proven another cycle of the Indo-European expansion only worked where we replaced people. In other words, India failed, even Central Asia failed. Where we replaced people in Europe, it worked. Where we replaced people, the Americas, it worked, right? Where we didn't replace people, South America, it didn't work. Where we replaced people, Africa, it worked. And where we replaced people, New Zealand, it worked. But if we don't replace people, it doesn't work. So that's the big lesson. And it goes back to, how do we know that? Look at the difference between our story and the measure. Okay, that's the loop I wanted to close.
Very good.
What do you give me that face for? What is that face? Huh?
Good work. I'm just making a note of the time so that I can note where we're at.
I can't tell the difference between you're being serious and you're laughing at me.
I'm not laughing at you.
Sometimes you're laughing at me.
I laugh, but I laugh. Generally, it's like, I don't laugh at you though. You're all right. I laugh with you though. You're crazy.
I'm a good kind of crazy.
Oh, I think so.
All right. Now I have to figure out what we're going to talk about.
Right.
We did legitimacy.
Yes.
And what I said is that today we would start with legal. I wanted to finish up yesterday. We ran out of time.
Okay.
So today I'd like to finish up with, we went over, can I
recap? Yeah, you're sharing screens.
Can you see disambiguating the evolutionary?
Yes.
Guy sent me a photo of my tabs here, laughing at me. Dude, it's like, it's just chapters in the book, right? It's just chapters. So if I want to work on this, I just click.
Right?
Right? Oops.
Oh no.
So it's just chapters. It's my outline, what I'm working on, and the Constitution, because I have to go back and reference it all the time, and the drafts of other stuff I'm still thinking about. So you can tease me all you want, but that's why you need 16 gigabytes of RAM.
There you have it.
All right. So going back here, we started out with there are three forces competing to produce decidability, what we call law. And I'm trying to disambiguate those three forces into what their goals are. And then I said, let's disambiguate the evolution of the ambiguity of the term law, which is that the universe has laws, right? Now, right, we have natural law, which are agreements. We have privileges, which are rights law. We have commands, which are either procedural law, or we have command law, which is just issued to us. Now, somebody's recommended to me in the past that I separate this into justifications
Huh.
and commands,
Okay.
right? And so I'm gonna I'm gonna do it this way. And then we got, okay, so now we're going to talk about man-made laws, and then what produces legitimacy? Well, we laughed about how the word legitimacy comes from genuine or real, and it was originally just applied to whether you were a legitimate child or not.
Right.
I don't know, why is that so funny? There's something funny about the origin of the concept of legal legitimacy originates in the legitimacy of a child. Well,
Right.
probably because it's property law, right? Property law, legitimacy of property law. And therefore, the primary origin of a lot of this property law is actually over inheritance, right?
Yes. Yes.
So it's the conflict over inheritance. Because, and when you're talking about land, inheritance is a huge asset. All right. So then we said, well, let's talk about the claim of legitimacy versus the evidence of legitimacy. In other words, legitimacy is, what are you saying is legitimate? The process of producing something, the sciences depend upon, the process of producing something, or the evidence that public has actually deemed it legitimate by market testing it. So for example, the great example is socialism and black markets. Black markets falsify socialism.
Right.
Right? They become the dominant market. Corruption falsifies socialism and communism. Why? Because you created a market for corruption. So it's a hydraulic process. You could say create a market for reciprocity, which produces inequality but evolutionary velocity under which you're prosperous. Or you can produce authority, which produces corruption and black markets at the cost of evolutionary velocity, which leads you to poverty. It's just a hydraulic system. Why? Because there's no difference between people and the physical laws of the universe, except the time it takes to equilibrate.
Right. Right.
That's all. So, all right. So, then we say, well, I said, well, what, when we're talking about how the public determines whether something is legitimate, how does that relate to whether it's moral or not? In other words, is there a relationship between morality and what we claim is legitimacy? Well, in the population of people, we have the origin of the law, right? The before section. We have the during section, which is what we are claiming its origin of legitimacy, which is authoritarian individual market evidence. And we have the consequence of it, the after state, which is how much resistance has the polity put up by, right? Or how much forces take to control it, or how much legitimacy does the polity attribute to it, or demonstrate that it's moral by adaptation to it. And so in summary, we determine whether a law is legitimate by whether it's maladaptive or adaptive. Right? Very simple. So now we get down to legality versus legitimacy, which is how it's framed in jurisprudence and legal law, or the practice of law. And that's that something is legal if it follows process versus legality versus whether it's, say, immoral and adapted and evaded versus whether it's moral, ethical, and beneficial because it's adhered to. So this is the problem of authority. Does legality determine legitimacy? And in the common law, it doesn't.
Right.
That's why we have this thing called the Supreme Court and the common law, is because what is sovereign? What determines legitimacy? Despite legality. Well, in the parliament, the dictator, the parliament, oops, how did that happen? Oh, I know why. Why isn't it indented? I don't know. Oh, it's because it's got a space. The dictator, the parliament, the dictator, the monarchy,
Yeah.
the parliament, survival, market. Cooperation. That's the people. So what determines legitimacy despite the dictator? So the parliament, the process. So the problem is, what's sovereign? Now, this is an interesting problem. Is what does sovereign mean? Sovereign, SOVRE, means what is the decider of last resort? Now, in common law, first, and then in English law, unfortunately, it's this.
Oh.
Right? So if I say in the UK, it's parliament.
Yeah.
In Canada, it's parliament. In Australia, it's parliament. In the USA, it's the law. And this is the big difference. So when you say rule of law, what does that mean? That means nothing.
Right.
Unless you know it's sovereign. So in effect, this is the big reason we're slower to move to the left than others. And of course, if we implement our constitutional reforms, which turn it from the rule of law from an undeclared custom that's open to interpretation,
Right.
to a science, then it's the science of law. So
Right.
the thing is, when you, this is, I did the, I've known, of course, I know the UK and Canada law. Canada's constitution is a joke. Australia's constitution is not. It just has no reference to the law at all. And it has no rights to protect Parliament, the people's sovereignty and the sovereignty of the law over Parliament. Now, the Queen theoretically has sovereignty over the law in Australia. But like I said, the monarchy is waiting out this bad experiment with arbitrary positive law. The US, though, we have the rights, right? We have the rights stated, and they're stated explicitly in some of the Constitution. They're stated implicitly in the Declaration, and they're stated really clearly in Blackstone. So if you understand those things, you understand that the US did the best job of creating the most scientific form of government possible. In other words, the least variation from natural law. Unfortunately, the Civil War, which has ruined it, with a Civil War competition for the Western expansion, ruined it. The Canadians have the Canadians abandoned the monarchy?
I don't know the answer. I don't
Can't
think
remember if the Canadians Constitution, I can't remember what happened. If the Canadian Constitution still means the Queen can override. The people in Australia can't appeal to the Queen. And so that's the problem in America, is that we don't have that. We can't appeal to the Queen. We've lost our judge of last resort. In other words, we've lost the apolitical means of restoring the law, regardless of the law, regardless of restoring legitimate law, regardless of legality.
right.
So if something is past Parliament, right, it's legal. That does not mean it's legitimate.
Right.
So in the UK, they don't have the written Constitution of America, but they still have the monarch. So I'm like, we've all got a piece of this puzzle. And aside from Canadians being free riders, it works pretty well. And the Canada would be fine if it got rid of the French, but they won't get rid of the French. That's the whole problem up there. And the fact that Ottawa is on the border with between French and English Canada. So what is legitimacy? Legitimacy, people like to, well, it went through government, it's legitimate. No.
Not quite right.
It's legal, but it's not legitimate. It's legitimate when it survives in the market. In America, we have two beautiful markets. We have the most important of which is the court system. We have the court, we have the Supreme Court, because the law is sovereign, not the government, not the Parliament. This is the problem the British and the French and the Australians have made. This is why they're more vulnerable, because political systems, in other words, groups always fail. Iron law of oligarchy, or iron law of hierarchy. You have to have someone who eventually decides. The thing is, what you don't want the person to have a via positiva. In other words, a via positiva deciding means that you're claiming you have knowledge, right? Of a lot of things you can't have. Well, markets are great for that. Parliaments are good for that. But what are judges good for? This isn't right. This may have passed the political process. It may be law, but it's not legitimate. That's what a monarch is supposed to do. A Supreme Court is supposed to say, according to the Constitution, this is legal, but it's not legitimate, right? Or it is legitimate. But the monarchy gets to say, it doesn't matter if it's legal either. It's not legitimate. And so, like I said, the British had the best system. This whole post-war shit just ruined everything. And so we need a standard. What I've tried to do is put a constitution down that allows you, that solves all these problems by disambiguating these terms, right? So that there's a difference between legality and legitimacy, right? And so there's no more of this positive law stuff. It's legitimate because it got voted in by 51%. No, it's legal, but it isn't legitimate until it's survived the population, the courts, and if necessary, the monarchy.
So we'll say legitimate is a higher standard than legal.
Yes.
Okay.
So somebody asked me, it's settled law. Well, what does settled law means? Settled law means the people consider it legitimate. If cases keep coming up to the Supreme Court, it's not settled law. Now you can go.
It's still controversial.
It's still controversial. If things get brought up to the Supreme Court because there's been some change, right? And they need the legislature to act. The court either has to create law or hand it over to the legislature.
Right.
The problem with our system is it contains no way for the court to submit a question to the legislature.
Huh.
Right. And so in order to decide, one of the courts should say, decisions should be, the court can say, this is, I'll uphold this. I'll deny it, this motion. And the third one is I'll submit this motion to the parliament because it's undecidable by the court without creating new law.
Clarification is necessary.
Right. So in many cases, I mean, it's just like, what we see too often is what's called creep, right? I mean,
Right.
Legal expansion is that they try to apply laws outside of the domain. So the way you solve that problem is you make the legislature state the scope of the domain under question. So that it has to be an explicit act to increase that domain, not to assume that a new thing is covered under the previous.
That points to the interstate commerce clause.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's a great example.
Just unbelievable.
Well, we know that's the origin of the problem, right? I mean, it's not. The whole point is the government is limited to commercial property disputes between the states. The federal government is prohibited from making laws that would violate natural rights. The states are allowed to make on whatever fucking laws they want. That's the thing. The only thing the states are guaranteed by the federal government is a Republican form of government. That there's a democratically elected set of representatives who have to go through the process of parliamentary approval, and then the federal government provides a means of dispute resolution. But most of this stuff, if it's not interstate trade, in other words, it's a social matter, it's limited to the states. Where the government has transgressed is where it's violated, it's expanded, it's artificially expanded its authority into the things the states aren't. They've tried to make an empire out of a federation.
They have successfully done so de facto by my estimation of it.
Well, like if you read all this liberal stuff that's going on, I mean, the guys send me tons of this stuff. They're like, the right wing is getting very close to, well, it's the only thing we tried everything else, though. We got to start making skull pyramids. And, we know that's happening. I mean, I can't believe how mad average guys are, like working class guys. They're just done.
They're sharpening their knives.
They're just waiting for it.
That's right. It's been about a year like
and then you get somebody like, who was on this, some guys the other day, one of the Ron Perlman, who and what is exactly what he says. I just want to live in a different country. Well, you can. We gave you one. Go there. great personal cost to us. We gave you one, so go there. But yeah, we don't want to live with you either. And the difference is that your way of working can't work. In any event, so we were
Knock yourself out somewhere else.
somewhere else. So legality versus legitimacy. I think, have we got this across? That
think so.
legality is a fact, right? It happens. That doesn't mean it's legitimate. In other words, it doesn't mean it's survived. You can give birth to a command. The command will not survive. You can say, well, we made this command according to the rules, therefore it's legitimate. No, it's just legal. Legality is a theory.
That's right. There's a in the military they talk about lawful order, right? Lawful orders, because the commander can issue an illegitimate order.
Say that again.
In the military, they talk about lawful orders. Does that make sense? That the commander can issue and it's illegal. It's an unlawful order,
Right.
and you have a
Well, the
duty-
military has a different problem.
right, but it's in the same vein.
It's the same concept. It may have been issued by command. He's using the term lawful, but it's actually legitimate.
Right, right.
The military uses the wrong term, and so it may be lawful, and I would say it's lawful, and it says, well, came down the chain of command, and that's how laws are made, right? But it's not legitimate law, and that means, if you're told to do heinous thing, I mean,
Yeah,
most people know what heinous shit is, right? They won't do it. Right now, and the level of heinous shit for Europeans is quite more intolerant than the level of shit of heinous for the Middle East. Matter of fact, they view the heinous as celebratory.
yeah.
Right. And then you look at their level of heinous of Mexican drug cartels, which is, barbaric.
Atrocious.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've domesticated war so much that we've lost the meaning of the term war. Well, we've domesticated law so much that we've lost the meaning of the term legitimacy. All right, so I got through legitimacy, right? That was what we're trying to do.
Yes.
So we say, okay, well, what is a law, right? I should say, I should have what is a law here. A limit on behavior.
Yeah.
In vernacular, in common law terms, this means is positiva is an
Duty.
duty, obligation, and negativa is a right, reciprocal duty, right? And in alien means that you can't escape either.
Right.
So this is said in the Constitution in a few places, but it doesn't say it consistently. So it enumerates rights, but it doesn't enumerate for every right the attendant responsibilities and attendant inalienabilities. So the most important one to me would be you can't have universal reciprocal defense of self-determination by self-determined means and sovereignty, reciprocity, truth, and duty, right? You can't have that if you don't have the right to bear arms to defend it. And that is an inalienable right, because the thing is impossible to bring about if it's alienable. So that means that if you don't serve in the military, don't police the commons, and don't carry arms, then you've violated the law of inalienability. Now, some people may be unfit for it. In other words, they're physically incapable, mentally incapable, emotionally incapable. Well, that's fine. But that also means that you are deprived of responsibility to have an opinion. Right? There's the first law is obvious. It's the right to bear arms.
It's not deprived, it's relieved.
Yes. You're relieved of your need to have an opinion, or your
duty
or
to express your
duty to have
opinion
an
in
opinion.
public.
And this is, of course, the reason there's a real assault on it is because if it's true, it means that women by their nature are less capable of insurance of sovereignty. My argument is, yeah, they're just as equally capable. The difference is, did they raise their sons to do it? We don't care if the women fight. We care if they raise their sons to do so.
Right.
Raise your daughters to do their duty, reproduction, raise your sons to their duty, defense and production. Sorry, it's not actually complicated. It's an evolutionary necessity. Question time is over. We don't have to like it. I don't like paying taxes. It's just a necessary thing for the survival of our species, survival of our self-determination. Well, having kids and serving and policing and producing are necessary functions for the preservation of our self-determination and our self-preservation. So just not an opinion. So what is law is that is really all it is, right? And the thing is that if we go into the etymology, I'm trying not to talk too fast, I'm sorry.
Okay, I slow it down when I transcribe anything.
I speed it up when I listen to myself.
I do too.
Where's
Except when I'm trying to copy it down, I'm like, I slow you down to about 0.75 when you kind of get on a tear. It's like, wow.
This is the trying to find the original. So you got to go back in time.
Yes, I like this.
You have to go back in time because every generation tries to screw something up.
Right?
It's not, the liberals aren't alone in trying to mess with words. Right. And so here, I'm going to put the two down, the ones I know that are important here, which is where's the IE? Oh, here it is.
There you go. That's interesting.
Here's this one.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's important we take an origin of the word. Sorry, I'm trying to overstate it here. We take the origin of the word, but the purpose of taking the origin of the word is so we know how it's mutated and expanded over time.
Right.
So I'm trying to get to this. It's a limit on behavior, what we can do, and that includes all the laws, physical.
Right. Right. It's like, it's just how it is.
Right.
That's right. That's
all
it. That encompasses the entirety of potential of human experience.
Right. That's it. That's all we got. Right. So the thing is to enumerate a law. You need all three dimensions. Sorry?
I see what you
did. Did I spell something wrong?
No, you've done nice.
All right. So to enumerate.
Right.
It's probably angle of the keyboard. What am I doing? Maybe it's to place the keyboard. To enumerate law, you need 3 dimensions: positiva, negativa, and inalienability. This is really reciprocity, right? So,
Right.
and so the whole point is, I want to try to get this down, which is we'll go to the earliest.
Wait, right. Make the etymology be inset. So just write the etymology and then inset them all.
I want to reverse them.
Okay.
The second one's really important. There's 2 core points here that are really. Okay, I don't like that one. I like this one.
There you go.
So first is that, where is it? To lay down.
Yeah. Way down there.
Where is it?
Um,
Something laid down. Okay.
yes.
This is important.
That's right.
Right. And so what this, okay, there's 2.
That should be the first one right there.
Yeah, I want to, is it?
Like the foundation, because it represents a foundational function.
Yeah, I think it's here.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, it's right here.
And it goes to the Greek one too. They all say it.
Yeah, it's because it's, I love Indo-European. I love our studies because they show how, despite the different Indo-European languages, how this thing moves through it.
Yeah.
And this is just cause to stand.
Yeah.
Right? I just think it's funny. Put it down, stand it up.
I like that. All of them say this. It's like fixing, determination, assessment. Which is, here's what's interesting. It reminds me of the German Setzen, right? It's to sit.
Right?
Yeah, Setzen. It's like,
Okay, so I'm going to say something, is that what they mean is,
yeah.
That's what they mean. To see. And to have been in existence for all to see. And so just do I got to turn my spell check around?
Maybe. I don't know if that's going to be good.
No, it'll create two, because there's not enough, the vocab, there's no dictionary doesn't fill my screen with red. So this is the real issue, right? It's to bring existence, right? And it's laid down, it's been in existence.
Which is, there's a okay, I'm holding.
Sorry?
I'm getting there. It goes to logos, the Greek logos.
There you go.
Which is,
explain.
Well, the common translation will be like the word of God, which is nature and nature's God, as you would call it, I think.
Yeah, except that our ancestors put the primacy of man.
Yeah.
So it would be laid down by man.
Well, it's like the works of man are attempting to emulate the word of God most closely, which is minimize the variance between that which is the natural order and that which is our perception of the natural order and our enactment.
You're just leaping ahead.
Sorry, boss.
No, you do that all the time. It's a beautiful thing. It shows how good you are.
Thank you.
So here's the second topic. I think I'm going to do it this
Wait.
way.
Okay. Yes,
Um,
that's the second one.
a specific law in a general sense, right?
Yeah.
So now we have a problem. What we have is
Right. Right. Okay.
or
Discovered. Yeah. Yeah. I like that series.
okay. And what did I forget? I hope I didn't forget where I was going. An existence by man discovered by man, brought existence to man.
This looks like the series that you just wrote that defines the two poles that are discovered in the etymology above.
Laid down and brought up. Is that what you're talking about?
It's like the series that you discovered in that at the bottom there, right above where the cursor is, above epistemology, is a series that appears to go between the poles that are defined by that etymological series above.
Which series above? That's what I'm questioning.
Oh, from the very top on the whole section called etymology is apparently the same series in historical sense.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know. No. Well, maybe because I'm trying to separate. I can do it. I can do it by this way.
There you go. There you go. You've done it. That's the split point.
I've got it. That's the split point. Right, existence.
Right. Pre-existing versus conjured. Which is like discovered versus imagined or
Well, we're talking about existence,
okay.
right? So it's already there. We discovered it. I should flip it around. Oh,
No, I like that. I think that's right. Pre-exists. It's to be discovered.
Right. So the point is why does existence matter?
That's like the basis of a philosophical book right there. It's like the name of it.
No, it's actually one of the foundation principles of legal study.
Of a law.
Right. It's one of the basic things. Right. Where remember we remember the distinction between tort responsibility, restitution, right?
Yeah,
And crime
yeah,
responsibility,
punishment. Yeah,
we mean blame and punishment. Right?
yeah.
Right? So that's why existence matters. Is because it has to be a law. Law must be laid down. That's what it means.
Which is to be publicly observable or
Yeah.
aware. Which is like, that's a funny thing too, man. Okay, so I'm going to talk about gravity for a second because it's kind of an interesting thing because it's what you stated was quite weird because it's like I'm thinking about physical laws, right? Like, how does this play into physical laws? So it's like, okay, kid falls down and goes bump and skins their knee, and they're responsible for that, but they're being punished in their own way, but it's not the same as punishment, like crime punishment. Okay, kid pushes the vase off the roof and hits somebody's stuff on the ground. Kid is responsible and should have known gravity works and is responsible. You know what I mean? It's like, okay,
Yeah, I do.
but that you know it works, and it's like even ignorance of it is no excuse, right?
Yep.
There you go. So there, I had to.
It's pretty hard to be ignorant of gravity.
Let's go like this. You claim ignorance all day long, though.
Yeah, but you see this all the time with you see people being ignorant of gravity, right? Trying to do things without understanding that your knowledge of gravity as someone who jumps up and down is very different as somebody who jumps from far or as when things fall.
Right.
My favorite thing is learning stonemasonry because I just took class for fun. It's
that's
like
cool, man.
But one of my favorite, it's just one of the things is this cars because I was in sculpture. I thought it would be interesting. Is that the basic reason is there's only one rule. I love these old guys, right? There's one rule. The tendency of a rock is to fall straight down.
There you go. It's like, just saying.
That's really all there is. There's nothing else. The rest of it's like, how wet and how dry do you want your mortar?
Right. I like that's good, simple, man. It's like what's amazing is doing something like that with a skilled tradesman, and you're like this. You're like, how hard can it be, right? It's like that guy knows some crazy stuff because he's done it 155,000 ways wrong.
It's actually not. It's actually a precision problem. A rock was going to fall straight down, but your tendency is to think the rock is a block, and it's not. Right? It's a shape all its own. And the tendency of this rock to fall based on the weight distribution is basically arbitrary. So that's why you used to get these guys especially in Wales, they like the flat stones.
Yeah.
You can build shit like a light speed with that kind of rock.
Yeah.
But you talk about New England fieldstone. Well, they're round, right? Because they're all glacial deposits. So you're a farmer in New England. You just basically farm this place, which means you're turning over global glacial debris like every time you farm, and it never ends. Of course, you're going to build a wall around your place with these round stones because you got to get rid of them somehow, right? And so you get these beautiful rolling Connecticut rolling fieldstone farm. But the problem is they're round, right? The tendency of a round thing, they're not round, actually. They're kind of all over the place. Anyway, so
there you go.
And then you get this look like you're stupid, right? Like, don't you understand that mortar's too wet? Or don't you understand that mortar's too dry? Right? What's wrong with you? Like, can't you tell the difference? I'm like, it's like when your mother tells you it should be the consistency of pancake batter. I don't fucking know what pancake batter consistency is supposed to be. It should be the consistency of whipped cream that can just beginning to peak. What the fuck does that mean? Right? It's the same thing with mortar.
Right.
Concrete. And then concrete. You'd think you'd want it to dry fast. No. You want to dry it as long as you can. Anyway,
Good.
how did I get on this?
That was good.
How do we get?
Must be
How
laid
the hell
down.
did I get there?
It's gravity.
So the problem is we've generalized the principle of what we consider laid down or existential into describing all the laws. We started out with custom and we ended up with applying it to everything that limits our behavior. Now, the problem is now we've got all these kinds of laws. And even when we say we make a law, we've got all these laws, right?
Right.
Right. Now, when we say we make a law, we have to worry about whether it's legitimate or not. And so now we've got a legal law that's not legitimate. Is it a law? Well, it's like, it's a theory, but it's not a settled theory.
Yes.
So there's no difference. I tried to make a note for that. Where is my epistemology note? There it is. So legal epistemology.
It's interesting.
So there is no difference. How do I say this between epistemology?
Right, like a theory. Right. Huh. Yeah.
Right?
That's
There's
it.
no difference between law, science, markets, evolution, biology, physics. It's all the same, one universal. Continuous, recursive, adversarial,
Yep.
disambiguation, my adversarial
Right.
competition, survival as a stable which we call existence
There you go.
by persistence. Bingo.
Oh, I
That's
gotta
it.
ask you this. Market competition above, like third sentence, second sentence. Market,
Where?
keep going. Market competition way toward the end. Down one, down one. No, you're a second line of that sentence, that paragraph, you're on the big one.
Oh, I see. You see the other. Okay,
Cursor.
second, which line?
Second line, large paragraph, says survived market competition.
Market. Well,
So define markets a little bit, like the market is like courts, norms, it's all the potentials, right? Okay. Thank you. Yeah. We only know we are running an experiment. Is that the next? It says we only how. Is that no? Okay. Until they're settled by the general public, right? Yeah. Nice. You happy?
I'm fucking thrilled.
Very good. Why don't you recap what we've done? We can wrap it up.
This needs to be. Sorry, I want to make a note here. What's
Right. Oh, there you go.
oh, I'll just get the,
There you go.
it's all over somewhere else. Here. So there's the number of these things.
Yeah.
And what's funny is you try to, it's not really captured anywhere,
Huh.
which is kind of funny. I mean, in other words, if you should do your work on it, you'll come up with a couple, but
Right.
it won't be exhaustive. All right, so Chris, we have to, it's like we've.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out how far back to go. I don't think I need to go back here.
I think that's too far. Yeah.
I'm going to go here.
All right.
So, sorry.
Go ahead.
So in summary, we're going to always produce three methods of human influence because that's all that's available to us. We'll develop coercive institutions of incremental suppression of the via negativa, as well as the via positiva. We'll develop those three institutions: seduction and religion, care and equality, remuneration and trade, cooperation and reciprocity, or forces and state, military, command, duty, hierarchy, etc. We always produce those. Polity's tradition, institutions are always trifunctional. In other words, they always cover this distribution. The only difference is that they vary in strength. So some of us might bias toward remuneration, which is rule of law in the contract in the European tradition, force or state in the Chinese tradition, or seduction and religion in the Middle Eastern tradition. So poly institutions are always going to be trifunctional. And you're going to not get just one primary institution like the force of state. You're going to get the subsequent forces that come out, the military, the government, etc. You're going to get contract and you get law and courts, whatever. And when I use law, I mean specifically commercial law. Whether we can talk about the difference between commercial law and state law another time. The problem is, of course, that human beings want to save neural economy, so we tend to favor one or more of these biases or some norm of these institutions. So what we do is we try to seek ambiguity. In other words, instead of maintaining three sets of rules like we sort of do in European civilization, everybody drives toward having just one concept of decidability, which favors their interests or which is within their ability, so that we create ambiguity. So our job, of course, is to disambiguate that. So all people seek that conflation, right? And there was always, and do so when we create ambiguous terms, we reduce our computational ability, creating fragility.
Close. Fragility. There you go.
I'm going to get, you know what? Nobody's going to let that pass. I'm going to get you create fragility in your women. I know what's going to happen. So we see all institutions likewise seek to impose their conflation monopoly on the other people. So they're always fragility. Must have been autocorrect was on.
Autocorrection. Yeah, right. That's what it was.
Yeah, go ahead. And since all institutions seek to propose it, all civilizations gradually produce fragility. I can't even type.
Apparently not.
So what happens is we drive to conflation. So our job as the people who continuously recursively disambiguate things so they're decidable in order to get away from that. Excuse me, I jumped ahead. So all three forces are competing to produce decidability, what we call law, or basically the rules, and they create that ambiguity. So our job is the disambiguators, and the science of desirability is to say, well, what is this thing called law? Well, in simple terms, it's a limit on behavior. It can be any of the laws, the physical, the natural, the evolutionary, the formological. And to enumerate any given law, you need to be able to make sure you've done a full accounting. That'll include the positiva as an obligation, a negativa as a right and duty from others, and an inalienability means you can't escape either one. So unfortunately, our laws don't generally do that, which they should. Now, in order to make sure that we disambiguated the term, we went through the history of it, which is to lay down, to put up, put down, to stand up, whatever, to make visible. And in doing so, we've produced a rule that limits our behavior, positive or negative, right? And so we end up with this as a pre-existing or created, natural versus man-made. And what does and we ask, well, why does it matter? And I don't think I fully answered this. A law must be laid, because of no harm, no foul, no crime. So we can't hold people accountable for punishment, even if we can conform them for restitution, if the law is not laid down. This is what prevents governments from entrapping you, right? That's, in other words, laws may not be retroactive. This is how we think of it. That's the. So now that we have this criteria, we could probably have done this easily. We say, okay, well, now that we have some basic, it's a law that limits our behavior. We're focusing now on the set of laws, and that laws should have all of these properties. Let's go into disambiguating it by certain, which is the laws of the universe, which I've already mentioned, agreement law, which is natural law, privilege law, which is rights law, justification or excuse making law, which we call positive law or procedural law, and just whatever the fuck we can get away with, which we call command law, right? But what's the legitimacy of these laws? In other words, these things can be brought into being, but how do they survive? Well, legitimacy is achieved by the fact that it survives in a market competition. Now, we can have moral laws and immoral laws. Moral laws will tend to survive, and immoral laws will tend not to survive. The laws that survive that are moral tend to be those that are incrementally suppressive and facilitate cooperation, or they're ones that are unrelated to cooperation. They're the production of commons, which in turn produce discounts for people. So the result is that all laws go through the epistemological cycle, which is the market cycle. I'm trying to find where I wrote this. Where did I write that? Right. All legal propositions are theories until they're settled science as evidence. So, in other words, the reason we know the difference between between an agreement law, in other words, agreement, it's survived by consensus, and a procedural law or command. Privilege laws we generally don't have too many problems with, although abortion is one of them. You end up with the fact that these things have to survive in the market. Well, the reason we know they don't survive is because they manufacture corruption, etc. Well, there are. Well, then how do what determines whether it's legal versus legitimate? Well, in legal, we have the question of who offers it. What's the criteria of decidability of last resort? Well, in the US, it's the law. We have a rule of law. These people have rule by parliament, even though they have rule by legalism. They don't have rule by law. We have rule by law because we have rule by the science of law. It's an incomplete articulation of the science, even though if you look at the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration, and the Federalist Papers, and and especially Blackstone, you understand that this is basically what they call natural law or legal science. So legality is just a name for the process, whereas legitimacy is whether it survives, and therefore there's no difference between the production of law, in other words, legalisms. There's no difference between the production of law and its survival in a marketplace, and there is in any production of any other goods or service that survives in the marketplace. None other, except unless there's corruption involved. Just like there's no reason something can survive in the commercial marketplace for goods, service, and information unless it's held in place by some sort of corruption, which we call in the political sense monopolies of various kinds, or just ordinary corruption. So I went forward to say I should probably relocate this, but I wanted to say what's moral, ethical, and immoral. I think we covered that, but it's the same thing. We know if something survives by producing this weight or producing the virtuous. That's pretty easy. And we also covered why Leninism is an attempt to subvert the natural law and evolution in order to obtain short-term gains of not adapting, in other words, not having the population adapt. instead at the cost of long-term gains of the returns on that cooperative. We also said that we could use the natural law to measure the story, the narratives that groups tell themselves, whether they're correspondent or their variation from correspondence, which is the variation from natural law. Don't know why that did that. We talked that people could be taught the agency necessary to avoid the very serious problem, is that there is a difference between, while we can tell ourselves stories and groups can tell themselves stories, individuals also tell themselves stories. One of the stories we tell ourselves is that we're right, or that we're good, or that we're moral, or that we're just, or that we're deserving, right? But these are all stories. The question is, these stories are actually testable. So that we can tell that story by our own stories, as well as cultural stories by the same thing. Well, we can also tell if other groups are acting in coercive or non-coercive or domesticating or non-domesticating means, and we can tell if other cultures' stories produce externalities. Well, our goal is domestication, because what we're trying to do is reduce the externalities produced by the irreciprocity of internal groups. Therefore, we can judge, again, groups and the stories of groups. Now, if we eliminated all the bad things from all the groups, we'd end up with the evolutionary origin of factions, which were all not false and irreciprocal. They were just a set of regular demands. And that would start with the female and male at opposite sides, leave to the left's desire for hyperconsumption, dysgenia, or the right's desire for hypercapitalization and eugenia, or the left's center drives consensus, the right of center's desire for conflicts between those prerogatives. So as a system, if we understand this as that without all these lies and falsehoods, our natural sexual distribution of interests is essentially just a distribution of sense, perception, and calculation that is exploratory and generative rather than degenerative. So this is basically the science of what is a law and what is not, whether it's legitimate, not legitimate, whether it's good or not, whether it's true or not. It's basically whether it deviates from natural law and a full accounting of the externalities produced by it.
Wonderful. That was good work.
Was it? I felt like I should order it a little differently, but
Maybe, but I think it was a good exposition of what we have done.
what comes next?
Good questions tomorrow.
I just want to make sure I know. I'll probably have run out my session yet. What comes next is what are the properties of a legitimate law? How do we tell?
Okay.
What is going to make it survive in them? We set up all these criteria. Now we're going to set up what it makes a thing legitimate.
Very good.
All right.
All right. Well,
right.
that I'll send you 2 videos here in short order.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Good work, Kurt.
Thanks for making me spurg out there for a while. Bye-bye.